Welcome, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here, and things are not going well for us. We are, of course, playing Hearts of Iron 3's Black Ice, playing as the U.S. Now, we're having supply problems. You understand the game, you sort of know why we are. Britain does not control Gibraltar, so we are pushing all of the American supplies in here that are then going along the land to here, but they do not go into British territory. Britain cannot supply into here, so these guys are starving. I am flying in as much supplies as I can. Oh no, no, cancel. Oh shit, I did that wrong. Rebase, accept. Rebase to, whatever, that messed up. I needed to air supply. See, I make mistakes. Okay, you, yes, resupply, air supply to here. You're going to fly there and fly back. Just what I needed you not to do, but okay. What you need are more armor divisions and mech units. I need more of everything, Arno, yes. No, I don't need them in Africa because I can't freaking supply them. But one thing I don't need is more fuel-hungry units here. And we're pulling out in Cairo, but we're without supplies, and they're attacking us in Cairo. Now you bring supplies to Kyoto. Now this is what you're supposed to be doing. Bringing supplies in. What do we have down here? Keep flying it. Okay, heavy bomber prototypes have advanced. Nice. Okay, well, that allows us to start researching some of these, but we are already researching too many projects. Yeah, these guys are doomed. Fighter pilot training advanced. Okay, that is down here. Like, no, we're still, well, no, we're right even with the projects that we can research effectively. Oh, major victory. Where do we have it? Battle of, okay, down here. Good. Now, these guys are going to attack at that. Pushing on the enemy, pushing hard. But the other forces, if they have fuel and supplies, get. Got a bunch of divisions there. And these guys are repairing. These guys are moving. Nope, not these guys. Oh no, those, yeah, these guys here. Thought I saw, yeah. They're coming there. I think we're gonna go after Malaga and then blitz into Gibraltar because I don't know if that'll be defended at all. And if there are troops there, it'll be much less defended than Gibraltar, and we'll be able to not supply them because we can't get a ground crew training, but maybe we can still get there quick enough. Get Gibraltar. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be forever to get these things done. Are you giving them money for supplies? No. pushing up into here. Yes, you can have rare materials. Hopefully you're getting some organizational levels back. Light armor designs have advanced. Very good. Either. Okay, I'd rather be doing stuff in, we're still in early 44 than our 44 techs. This is not helping us, so I've stopped doing that. Designs, security units, don't know how much we need that. We do have a few more things like that to do that we could be doing. Would help us out. Could start jets, but I don't think I need that or get that far in the game. Yeah, we could do streamlined hull or air independent. Okay, we don't want to do air. So now you have to watch some of these things. Air independent propulsion. To the best of my knowledge, and I am not the best expert on armored advances. Yes, you have no M60s. Yeah. Referring to the tanks, yeah, no, we don't have it. The Germans did, to my knowledge, the only air-independent propulsion submarines during World War II was done by Germany in, I believe, 2 test submarines. They had 2 rocket submarines. And how do you do a rocket submarine? Well, they did it. I forget the guy's name, a scientist who also worked on other projects too. Built a couple, I think in 43, so fairly early. Tested them around the Baltic. And the rocket engine is, in essence, inside the submarine. It is not outside the submarine. But it is burning clean fuel enough that it can burn under the water. And air independent doesn't mean that it doesn't need to come up for air ever. It just means that you don't need air to run the engines. See, like on a diesel electric submarine, to run the engine, to generate the electricity, you have to run the engine. So you need to be either on the surface or with a snorkel or something like that. So it's dependent upon air. These submarines could go down and run their engines at full power under the water, and they were really fast. And they had, in essence, a rocket type engine in there that propelled the submarine under the water. So it was really fast for submarine. I mean, like 30 knots or something like that. It was, fast for a ship. And these were fairly small test submarines. I mean, and the idea that they were a proper submarine, holding a crew of people, but not like a coastal submarine kind of thing. One of these kind of guys, not a big long range submarine or whatnot. I don't know how quiet they were compared to when running their engines versus. I think they'd be quieter than a diesel engine running, but I don't know if there were anything quiet like just the electric engines running. But they did that. Okay, and so you have to watch about putting something like this into the game, or if you're the player, because you can see here that if you go, oh hey, visibility down, but you're radically reducing the range of your submarines. And unfortunately, the way this game works is this is going to affect all submarines, current and future production, because it will upgrade. I believe it now. Okay, now maybe, and some techs you have to put it back through, and maybe this would only affect future production or a rebuild, sending it back through the production line. Some of the technologies here, and I don't know specifically which ones for submarines, but I do know, like on the capital ships, to get the benefit of like the thicker armor and whatnot, you have to send that ship back through the production line. You we can come up. We need one in the U.S. here. No, not that. You can here. You can click to upgrade that, and if you upgrade this and you hit submarine, what it will do is, just in case you don't know, and I know many of you people know this stuff, it'll go back into production. It won't cost the same as a new ship, but it will go through the production facilities and come back out with its upgrades. So some techs need that. Other techs, like light anti-aircraft artillery, that will just upgrade over time while sitting in a port. They need to sit in a port and not be active, and that'll upgrade, because that's, so I don't know which techs where and everywhere. So I don't know if this would do your current production without going through or not. I just don't know. But do you really want to radically reduce the range of your submarines if you're going to do this? Now, if you're Germany and you're looking at trying to have, and you're fighting against America, who has really good escorts with a lot of high levels of detection, operating, and you're operating like near, near your coastal regions, in European waters, kind of thing. Yeah, it's maybe a good idea to do this. Now, if you're wanting to operate on, from Germany to operate along the American coast, this would be a bad idea to do this. So you got to keep this in mind. If you even want to, and this is why I often hover over some of these things, like here, support submarines, the milch cows, but your visibility goes up heavily, and your air defense goes down heavily. So because that's presumably the air defenses and the visibility, and I could argue against this, but is happening on the surface enough that you're being spotted. I could argue against this one, and just the idea of the milch cow. The Americans mostly just built long submarines and didn't bother with that. So I'm constantly going over these and looking for what the benefit is. Like I say, some of this, tactically, like if you're the Soviet Union or something, not that you necessarily would spend the time in researching this, but you may not be looking, and you're just fighting Germany and Italy, you may not be worrying about long-range submarines, so yes, this would be a good idea. But we're not going to do this. But streamlined hulls. Now, this is something that the U.S. doesn't do. I'm sure they understand the improvements that this would make. Now, they're mainly talking about speed here, and that's I would agree is the big improvement. But there is also a improvement to more quiet. Because you got to understand, there's the pressure hull of the submarine, and that is a series of tubes generally, one big one and maybe a smaller one sitting on top for the up in the sort of the bridge up the top. But the big tube inside of it, that's where all the people are. Then outside of that is a secondary hull, and that's what you see when you look at the submarine. And there's a lot of void spaces around that, and especially if you notice, like when a submarine dives, part of all of that spray coming up is like all the void spaces just that had air in there just quickly evacuating out and causing spray. Some of it is dumping of air from some of the so it depends on also how they're going down, but from some of the ballast tanks, because they can also go down just by engine power and whatnot. But so the more you have these shapes around the ship, they cause sound in the water as you go through them. So the smoother the hull it is, the less sound. Now, I don't know for the various passive listening devices during World War II, how good they were to pick up those kinds of sounds. Now, late in the war, the Americans were adding bigger and often two big guns and more guns onto their submarines because they were engaging a lot of small vessels, shall we say, in Japanese waters. Not necessarily just around Japan, but also between Japan and the mainland Korea and whatnot, and wherever, that weren't worth torpedoes, but were fairly big. And so they went up to 5-inch guns, short-barreled 5-inch guns. Some of them even had 2 of those on the submarines. And then they also had the sort of traditional 40 millimeter and 20 millimeter, but even that they were mainly using for surface targets. So they were doing a lot more of these things by the end of the war. After the war, they actually convert a bunch of those submarines to streamlined hulls, keep them going into the Korean War era. Germany is developing a streamlined hull. They're learning that they're not going to win surface actions against Allied air or surface vessels with their guns. So get rid of the guns, get rid of all that, and make them, instead of boats that can go under the water, because that's in essence what most all of these really are, except for like the air independent designs. But most of them are designed as boats that can go under the water. Germans are learning we should have a truly submersible vessel that only surfaces when necessary, as opposed to the opposite, a surface vessel that only dives when necessary. Because again, until they get the snorkel going, most of the time the submarines, they're going out into the Atlantic, they're on the surface day and night. Now they very quickly, around here, learn that they've got to go as much as they can submerged out of here during the day, because they'll be spotted via air, because there's enough, air operations going on, and periodically they get sunk by submarines, because the British will have submarines loitering off of here and seeing surfaced, or sometimes even submerged with the periscopes up, but seeing the German submarines and shooting them with torpedoes. But once you're out here, there's a lot less observation, and then of course they're still looking for air targets and whatever, getting ready to dive, but they're to keep their you're going at about 2, maybe 3 knots when you're submerged. And yeah, okay, over 10 hours, that's 20 or 30 nautical miles. But that's still creeping out here, where you're going more like 15, maybe 20 knots or whatever, surfaced. So you want to spend most of your time surface movement. So that's how the German, and I'll get to the chat here. I know people are saying, get somebody in here in just a second. So the Germans are going, oh hell, we need to mostly stay under the water, get up only long enough to charge our batteries if you're using a diesel electric submarine, and then go back down and spend most of your travel time under the water. So they're too late in the war to affect the outcome, not just affect who wins or loses, because you got to realize there's 2 ways you're affecting the outcome here. At some point it becomes, and I've talked about this a lot, impossible in my opinion for Germany to win at some point. I mean, we'll all agree, when the Soviet armies are sitting outside of Berlin, it's impossible for Germany to win. But at what stage, and I would say pretty early on, it becomes impossible for Germany to win. But they're still affecting how the outcome is going to be, meaning, is it going to be the Soviet Union marching into Berlin, or is it going to be the Allies marching into Berlin? Or do you do if you do it early enough, do you do a Stauffenberg assassination attempt, get rid of the Nazis, and then we surrender, we want good terms, kind of thing and whatnot. So you may still lose, but it may not be kind of thing. Hello, Rise Fall, how you doing? Good. Needed a dose of history. Well, very good. Hopefully I'm giving it to you. Well, and somewhat, we're playing as the United States. Spain entered the Axis, and then eventually Portugal entered the Axis. So that is taking it off of the historical course. Italy had conquered, or this was actually Vichy over here, and then Italy conquered Tunisia. So we're coming here. Italy has conquered North Africa, and we're trying to take it back, and we're having supply problems. So, these are some U.S. forces, British forces are trying to retake this region. The Soviets pushed down and liberated Iraq and have taken this territory, but are now stopped pushing in here. So it's somewhat historical, but not entirely. And this is the current state of the Eastern Front for May 1944. The Germans had earlier taken Leningrad and are still sort of holding up here in Finland and whatnot, but are being pushed here, which is sort of not the Leningrad part, but the rest is sort of 44 as it was. And Japan is holding here, Japan, Britain, and Burma. I've been able to hold most of the Philippines. Britain's hold some of the Dutch East Indies, and we're sort of battling around. So yeah, it's somewhat historical. It's historical in the sense that I'm playing as American, trying to defeat the Nazis and all that. But beyond that, it's gone a little off the rails. Not terribly, but a little bit, and reasonably off the rails. Okay, training has advanced. Carrier air groups. Yes. Okay. No, that's Cass. Here's Cag. And light armor design. Okay, we've already dealt with that. So we can do 2 more research. So yeah, so you have to watch, like I was going on here. We'll go for streamlined hulls. You have to watch what, and yeah, we can do periscope here. I don't know. These will, I think, upgrade. I don't know if we want to slow our units down. A lot of these we could start researching, so we will start pushing through these. No, they never got Stalingrad. They never got Stalingrad or Moscow. They did take Crimea for a while and did sort of push to Rostov here, but that was about somewhere in there. That was about as far as they made it, and the Soviets have now pushed them back. Their one big victory that did sort of turn the tide was taking, and it's still obviously holding up in Leningrad. That was as far as they managed to get with that. So yeah. Now we have, okay, the fleet has arrived. We have our forces. Okay, let's get all non-garrisoning forces, which is everybody but the garrison. And we're going to head over here, because we got to take Gibraltar back. That's our next target. Take Gibraltar back. We're going to land here, because I'm hoping small garrison, maybe small to no. No, thank you. And they're being pushed on here. Okay, we've got this. Let's support the attack up there. I know that's almost done, but make sure we get that done. Got a Spanish destroyer out here. Okay. Australia wants to build another submarine. Sure, major victory. Where did we have it? Oh, good. Romani. Okay. Now, how long? Okay. Well. Let me cross there because there's some people down there. A question. If Spain and Portugal would have joined the Axis in World War II, would the Axis have... actually, I would say it make it worse. That's an interesting question, and I've talked about it before. But not everyone watches everything. I make so many videos, I know. Okay. In my opinion, if Italy had stayed neutral and had been neutral but friendly to Germany, maybe not, because Spain did do the blue division that sent it off to go fight the Soviets, but maybe not even do a blue division for Italy, but just allowed a reasonable amount of trading to go through, which very well might be Italy buying oil from somebody like Persia, and then reselling, not huge, not maybe enough to support the whole war effort, but enough to help the war effort. Doing some trading like that with essential resources, maybe selling food and other things like that. If Italy had stayed neutral, if which then would mean probably Greece staying neutral, may mean Yugoslavia staying neutral, and if Spain stays neutral, all you have for Germany to worry about in the southern front, they don't have to worry about the Mediterranean at all. Now, it does allow Britain to move resources through the Mediterranean, which is critical to Britain, both ways, whether it's like troops to go fight the Japanese, or food from Australia for Britain, or whatever it might be, or oil from, Iraq or wherever. So it would help Britain in a way, but all Germany would, you'd have Vichy France, and all Germany would have to worry about is if there's an Allied landing down here. And maybe not without Italy going into the war. You might have probably America would force and push into, liberating North Africa. And so at that point, Germany would have to garrison this bit of coast. I mean, it would go a little more over to Nice here, but it would be this bit of coast that they would have to garrison on the Mediterranean. You wouldn't have to deal about Italy. You wouldn't have to worry about Yugoslavia or Greece. And then, from Germany's needs, you need Ploetzi. You need the oil from there. So Germany could have a much more limited front against Allied invasions and be able to focus so much more effort on a timeliness into the Soviet Union. Okay, I know Reisfeld asked about Spain. Okay, now, so there you go. You have that problem. If you cut off the amount of forces, I think Italy is a net negative to the war effort. Obviously, they tried to push Yugoslavia into the Axis, and that sort of pushed them more towards the Allies, and because of things, they get invaded. So that becomes an ulcer, a troop drain. They do not have any significant resources that are significantly helping the Axis. So just controlling that territory is a negative to Germany. Hungary's army ain't that great. It could almost be left out, but and basically all they're sending to the Eastern Front is an army, meaning, 2 or more corps into the East, and I think it's like about 3 or 4 corps, I don't know exactly, but it's one army. Romania is actively only really producing 2 armies to the East Front once they get out of immediate contact with, hey, Beam Slam, and once they get out of immediate contact with the Soviets. So expeditionary armies or forces are just 2 armies going east. And these help for position, on the Soviet front, and just make up manpower. As we, learned with the Stalingrad campaign, neither of these guys' armies can stand up to any aggressive Soviet moves, with a lot of effort. So so their formations as armies are not very helpful. Now there's some more. Their forces as size of divisions are. And this may be looking back in history, but looking at them as I would take, a German corps of either 2 or maybe 3 divisions. Most corps are about 3 divisions. Corps are supposed to have, you can put a corps with just 1 division, but the idea is that there's 2 or more divisions there. Is I would do something like 2 or 3 German divisions and like 1 Hungarian division. And similarly with the Romanians. So that they're balanced out, so they're part of the front, so their reserve forces are holding part of the front with their German force in reserve, so if the Soviets attack where the Romanian division is, the Germans can come and relieve that, so that they're useful in combat, but you're not holding a major section of the front with them alone. It does hurt their national pride. It means their higher commands do not, their corps and their army generals do not get commands to do things. And of course, they can supply lots of manpower to hold down rear areas. So they are a net positive to the war. Bulgaria ain't much of a help either. I mean, they're mostly helping on occupying territories that didn't need to be in the war. So you don't need Bulgaria in the war. It doesn't help. So that would help Germany. Now Spain and then Portugal. Well, neither of their forces are very good. Portugal did a study sometime fairly early in the war, and they decided that they had enough ammunition to fight for 4 days. That was it. After 4 days of fighting, of intensive fighting, they were out of ammunition, and that was referring to both things like rifle and machine gun bullets and artillery ammunition. They could fight for 4 days, and then they were, well, okay, then we're done. So if somebody declares war on them and no invasions, no big action happening, well, they can stay around. But once there's an assault, they can defend themselves for 4 days. That ain't going to last you very long. Whether you are defending yourself, and they were at the time mainly looking at the idea of because America takes over the Azores during the war, and the Portuguese still continue to manage everything, all the civil society situations, and whatever limited garrison that's out there in the Azores stays out there. But America sets up bases and occupies it. And so, and Portugal lets this happen and is not upset that it happened, but doesn't want to enter the war. So Portugal realizes that even if whatever sides it joined or forced to join by being attacked, they ain't going to last very long. Spain is in better shape than that. But you got to remember, Spain is heavily dependent on German munitions to fight its civil war. On both sides. Actually, Germany is supplying both sides with munitions, meaning bullets and bombs and that kind of thing, as well as weapons and munitions. So, hey, Exurgent. So Spain to fight the Civil War is heavily dependent upon Germany at that point. Now, by 1941. Maybe Spain has gotten better munitions production, but probably not by much, because they're more worried about starvation and other things. Franco has other worries on his hands. So if they enter the war, they're going to provide divisions that aren't really trained as well as other forces, as German forces, and probably not even as well as the Italian forces, at least most of the divisions. Yeah, I know the Blue Division fought very well on the Eastern Front, but that's sort of an ideological elite cream, cream sort of skimmed off the surface everywhere. These were a bunch of gung-ho guys that wanted to fight communism, veterans of the war, and the Germans made sure that they were good leaders in there, so it fought well. As opposed to having a bunch of political appointees or cultural appointees, some Hidalgo or whatever, people that just because they're cultural past get promotion. So they had good people commanding and fighting the Blue Division. So the Blue Division does very well. But I don't know what the motivation of the standard nationalist soldier who was fighting for his country against the communists. Yeah, that may be, enthusiastic. But I don't think the standard national soldier wanted to fight everywhere else. And they didn't hate Britain, and they didn't hate America, as far as I know. They didn't, think that they were some terrible country that you got to fight. Oh, sure, they want Gibraltar back or something, but that wasn't like, a motivation for the national soldier to go die in some combat. No, it was fighting for his home, fighting for his religion. And Britain nor America were going to take away his religion like the communists were. So there isn't that motivation for your standard national soldier to fight hard, to fight the Western Allies. And yeah, okay, instead of a Blue Division, a Blue Corps or something on the Eastern Front, yeah, that might be helpful, but it's not that helpful. And so you get a situation that now Most of the coastline is undefended. So you're going to then, have to defend that coastline, build an Atlantic and a Mediterranean wall. The Spanish aren't going to defend it well enough against a enthusiastic American invasion. So you're going to have to send down German troops down to guard all this stuff. Now it is sort of like Italy in that it's mountainous and it's going to be tough country to conquer in lots of cases. So if you come in here, you got a lot of mountains and hills to fight around. If you come land down here, you got a lot of. So I know I've read a lot about the Peninsula Campaign during the Napoleonic Wars, and so yeah, there are these plains out here in the middle, and there's these plains up here. But to sort of get around, you got mountainous here, and mountainous here. Well, the Americans and the British are going to be very, like they were in the Napoleonic Wars, very naval mobile, so they'll be able to land at all of these ports. So you'll have to garrison them wherever they land. You'll have to fight in there. It just becomes a net drain on Germany. Spain was producing weapons for Germany. I have an Astra pistol that never made it into German hands, but was of the type that was being made for Germany during that time period. Eventually, of course, as they were still producing the pistols, little 9mm pistols, look sort of like a tube with a handle, the little Astras. That the Germans were buying in fairly large numbers until, of course, D-Day and the Anvil landings down here cut off trade with Spain. So they were selling small arms in relatively small numbers, for the war, meaning in thousands of guns, but not hundreds of thousands of guns. So somewhere, I don't know, they may have sold 10,000, 20,000 of these pistols to the Germans, as total or something. So not huge numbers for a war effort of industrial scale, but they were making money selling some weapons to Germany. They were selling a lot of tungsten that was being mined both in Portugal and Spain, selling that up to Germany, and selling other things to Germany during the war, and also selling particularly a lot of tungsten to Britain. Britain was just buying it and stockpiling it just to keep it out of Germany's hands. They didn't have the ships to remove it from Spain or Portugal. Just buy it, put it in warehouses. So driving up the price, and Spain was making lots and lots of money out of that, selling it to either side, and the price was just going up and up and up, and they were making all kinds of money. So having it as a somewhat friendly neutral to Germany is much better than having them actually in the war. They would actually hurt, in my opinion, the German war effort, because Germany would, in essence, have to be garrisoning it. Now, I know prior to America coming into the war, Germany is trying to get them into the Axis because they don't necessarily see American coming in. They see the idea of getting Gibraltar. They see the idea of submarine bases, which also, because then maybe you can, we also have Portugal in the war here, which has, down here. But with Spain, Spain has a nice little colony down here. That would probably disappear very quickly because the British or Free French would take it out. But, get the Canary Islands and whatnot out here for more U-boats. They're looking at that, and Hitler's trying to get them in. But I see it as a net negative. Let me save this here. See what some of the chat has said. Oh, okay. I think I said hi to Beam Slam. Okay. Okay, back up here. And hello, Mirror Man. How you doing? Okay. You will also find the UK turn to keep Portugal out of the war because of exploited for espionage. Oh, absolutely. There was lots of espionage going in both Portugal and Spain. Some of it encouraged by both sides. Yeah, they're outside. Yeah, because you're right. Rise, fall. They just got out of that very brutal civil war. What happens is, and this is Franco was a brutal man. He did brutal things I don't necessarily approve of, but I sort of admire Franco. No, I don't want to live under a dictatorship. I actually knew somebody who was an American who lived in Spain in the early 70s under Franco, and actually sort of liked it there under Franco. But I see Franco as a somewhat of a George Washington for modern Spain. He saved it from communism. He also saved it from nationalism. He saved it from getting in World War II. He realized Germany had a big, massive army. This is before the war, before he invades the Soviet Union. Germany is sort of the master of the continental Western Europe, and could do to some degree what he wants to if he's willing to put his army, into the effort. And so when Hitler comes down to try to get Franco and Spain into the war, Franco said very smartly, in my opinion, says, when asked about, when trying to get into, says, yes, Hitler, I'll join your war so long as we have a bunch of needs that we need to have done before the war starts. So before we come in, here's this long list of stuff we need to have. Food shipments, and of course Germany doesn't have enough food to feed itself, but we need all this food because we're importing food from South America, and it's still not enough because there's still starvation and whatnot in Spain, dealing with the Civil War and dealing with the wreckage of the agricultural industry in the Civil War, as well as transportation, blowing up bridges and railways and all that is being repaired still. And I don't know, this is I think late 1940 or early 41, again before Barbarossa kicks off. Obviously post the fall of France, but right in there that Hitler's trying to get in there. So I don't know how much is repaired versus how much is destroyed, but they're still trying to get all this stuff going. And so, if we're going to go to war with the British, well, we're not going to be able to bring in shipments of food from, South America because of, British blockade will happen. So we need all this food, we need all this ammunition, we need these weapons, we need these aircraft, we need all this stuff. So yes, as soon as you supply this unsupplyable list. So it wasn't a no, it was a yes, but conditionally, you've got to hit these conditions. And probably the idea is that if you're going to invade us, it's going to cost even more than because of garrisoning and loss of life, German life and whatnot, to come and invade us. So yeah, it's sort of like a yes but no kind of thing. So it was a way to keep that going, and he was very smart. So I know a lot of people hate Franco, and he did a lot of brutal things. I'm not saying I agree with them. And if you're a Spanish person listening, but he killed my grandparents or something. Yes, he did lots of brutal things, and it was a very brutal time. I hate communism, so he defeats communism. Not saying I want everything I like about Franco. I'm trying to be very careful about this, but he saw, he doesn't start the Civil War. There's other generals that sort of start the coup that fails. He wins the Civil War, and he mostly keeps foreign domination out of Spain and keeps the war out of Spain, moves Spain into a modern era, because before then they're still very peasant agriculture of a muscle type, whether it's animal or human muscle type, moving it into modern farming. All that up until the 1970s, and I'm sure there's a lot bad stuff going on at different levels that people can point to, but he brings that out without being Stalin or Mao or Hitler or any of those people. He brings it into a modern world. So it's a tough and brutal situation. I'm not saying it isn't, but with all of that, I do sort of admire, as you can tell, Franco. Not that, he has his problems, serious ones. Okay, tax departments have declared me an outlaw. But apart from that, I'm fine working at the moment. Oh, well, sorry about the outlaw status. I don't, Virginia's being Sam. Right now, I'm checking on some research and results, just mundane task. Okay. Interesting call. Gibraltar back, bearing in mind that the vast majority of its history. It was a Muslim North Arab, Gibraltar or whatever is how you would pronounce it in Arabic. And the British protectorate enclave, not sure when getting. Well, Spain did own it for a while. The British take it away from Spain. So yes, Mirrorman, they did own it for a while. Gibraltar dictatorship is fine, just a dictator goes mad and becomes power. Yeah, and Franco, see, and here's the other thing I admire about Franco. Unlike, say, Oliver Cromwell, who was a deeply evil man, he sets up a dictatorship. Well, he's, on the parliamentary side against the evil royalists, and once he defeats the royalists, they never have a parliamentary election again, and he eventually expels everybody from parliament that disagrees with him, just what they complained that the king was doing, and he rules as a dictator in Britain, and then puts his son in charge when he dies. So in essence, he's become a king without a crown, in that it is now a hereditary dictatorship. General Monk, who is the charge of the garrisoning army of Scotland, marches down and picks out Cromwell's son and invites Charles II back in as king. Franco sets it up on his death to have the return of the king, and there was a fascist party. Franco was not a member of it, but he sets it up so that the king comes back. Not that he thinks it's going to be some royal dictatorship, but that would allow a democracy to function with guardrails, if you know what I mean. Because there is even an attempt after Franco's death to have a fascist coup in Spain, but that collapses very, very quickly. It's just there for a couple of days that they're trying to do, or whatever, maybe just a few hours. I don't know. It collapses very quickly. But unlike the Spanish Republic without the king, meaning you can have swings over into, vote into not just socialism but communism and in essence a people's republic of whatever, which is Franco doesn't want. He understands that if you set up with a monarchy, you can have guardrails, so the government moves to the left, moves to the right, moves back to the left, swings around, but within guardrails, so that you don't have the government going and killing monks or nuns in the monasteries just because they're religious, and that's what was happening under the Republican government. So Franco sets up modern Spain, post-Franco modern Spain. Now it's probably moved further to the left than Franco would have been comfortable with, but it has not gone to some radical people's republic because of what he did, and because he set it up so once he dies the monarchy comes back and it has a functioning government. That is also why I like Franco, because he looks out for his country. I mean, he never, I guess, feels, and again, I'm not an expert on Franco, but I guess he never feels comfortable enough to step down and turn it over to the king or the monarch, or to democratic elections. But he does set it up so that on his death it transitions to a monarchy with democratic representation under it. Where do you intend to land in Port? I'm intending to land here in Malanga and try to blitz into Gibraltar. I think that'll probably be faster, better than just going straight into Gibraltar. And the reason I'm landing here is this is where all of my landing craft are. Okay, I can't get my landing craft out past the Straits of Gibraltar, and I can't get my landing craft currently out past through Suez until I control both banks of Suez. So. And the reason I'm doing this is to control one of these ports to be able to get supplies, and Britain to be able to get supplies into the Mediterranean. So I have to land somewhere in the Mediterranean. And I think if I come straight for Gibraltar, I saw at 1.1 here, one sort of unit there. I don't know if there's anybody here. But this has max level fortress, so it's going to be the hardest to take. Now I won't have the ability, well, now I may fly in supplies, but if I can do this fast enough, maybe I can blitz in and take that. This is rough, so we will see. So this is what I'm planning on doing. Okay, and on Gibraltar, Britain gets it at the same time. They get Gibraltar and they get Minorca at the same time. I think it was in the War of Spanish Succession. Or maybe it was the war before that. Either late, because in 1685, Spain gives Tangiers to Britain as a dowry for, I think it was Catherine of Braganza, or one of the princesses that I forget which, the one of them that marries either Charles II or James II. I think it was the one that marries Charles II, but I'm not sure. They give up. Britain holds it for a while, then loses it. Not worth holding on to it, but it's part of the dowry. Then later in the early 18th century, they get Gibraltar and Mallorca. And then it's, I think, during the 7 Years' War, they, and this is Admiral Byng, who gets executed on his own deck eventually, loses a Minorca and he's executed for not trying hard enough to defend it. They lose it to a Spanish reinvasion, but they hold on to Gibraltar until this day. So Spain did have it for a while. So yeah, Britain takes most things off Spain. Should the USA be giving New Mexico? Well, down here, this is called, I think, the Gadsden Purchase. We actually bought this from the Mexican government. South of this, this is the Colorado River here. I don't know what this is, but south of here, we actually bought. I mean, we bought this from them. And of course, Texas fought for its independence, and Mexico recognized its independence. And then, of course, Texas joins the Union, and of course California declares its independence and was independent for 4 days and then joins the Union. So we can argue that over that, but southern New Mexico and or southern Arizona and a little bit of southern New Mexico was physically, this line was bought, paid money for, not invaded, not conquered, not the border move. No, they like, hey, you want a bunch of cash or gold or silver or whatever it was? And Mexico goes, yeah, sure. Well, you know, and they sell this to the United States. This little bit is a pure purchase. It is not. Also, Alaska, pure purchase from the Russians. They sold it to us. There were no U.S. ships off here demanding it. It was like, hey, Russia, who was, I think, involved in some war at some point, you know, with the Turks or something, over Crimea or whatever at the time. Hey, you're having a problem. You want some cash to fight your important war? Yeah, okay. We'll give you cash for Alaska. And they're going, great, because Alaska was profitable, but not that profitable, and they needed money now, cash now. So yeah, it's not entirely that. Okay, Arno, what do you think would have happened if Franco had lost the Civil War? Spain would be invaded. It would have joined the. Okay, I think, from my understanding, is as well, if very early on in the Spanish Civil War, if Franco had lost, it might have stayed a sort of Republican Spain that would have been dominated by radical leftists, communists, anarchists, and syndicalists, and it would have been a holy hell of a chaotic mix. Late war, if it had gone sort of the way it was going, somewhat took as long as historical, with the Soviet influence, I believe it would have become a People's Republic of Spain with only communist forces loyal to Stalin controlling it. So I think it would have become a Soviet puppet. So with it being a Soviet puppet, up until the Barbarossa starting, it would be a pseudo-German ally, because whatever Stalin says, it goes. If it was a radical syndicalist thing, you know, and of course, if you're going to Barbarossa, Germany knows it needs a two-front war. And I don't know how that would have played out with Germany in the sense of Hitler's plannings. Because if it's radical syndicalists and anarchists and communists and socialists with various, mini states and other kinds of things in there, he probably would have just kept his forces moving down, after France is done, taken over Spain, and propped up, and maybe put in some propped up puppet state, because people would have been happy that, if Hitler comes in with a light touch and just deals with the radical crazies, a lot of people would be happy in Spain that it happened, I think, because radical crazies are just, and we can talk about how problematic these are. I hate using that word, how much of a problem they are. So now, by the time, late war, if it's a Soviet protectorship, Hitler can't invade until he's at war with the Soviet Union, because it would mean it would be going to war with the Soviet Union. That would be a different situation. It would have been bad either way. Yeah, it's crazy. Some free booze, please. Okay, Gibraltar was Moorish until 1642, then Castilian, Spanish 17. Okay, that's what I was thinking. 1704. Then British since. So no, I think it's British. It's a British possession. It's not even like on Cyprus here, in which there's a British base that the Cypriot government, is happy to have, because it's actually right along the partition line with the Turkish puppet state there. But no, it's British territory. I fully agree. That doesn't mean that Spaniards don't quote unquote want it back. It's when they want it back doesn't mean that they somehow naturally deserve it or something. It's just that's what they want. So we can say Britain conquered the world and America bought it. Yeah, America bought a bunch of the world. I mean, we bought the Louisiana Purchase. I know they didn't go ask the Indians that were living there. They bought it from France. But they bought it. They bought, I think they bought Florida from Spain, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, if Spain was or Florida was really mostly over here and maybe a little bit over here. There was virtually nothing down here. And no, they didn't ask the Indians locally, but I think it was buying Florida from Spain. And America helped out the Texans, but the Texans weren't just a bunch of white people. There were a bunch of the local Hispanic population in Texas did not like being ruled from Mexico City. So it was overwhelmingly popular locally, Texas independence. And California declared its independence, so bought here, and of course U.S. buys Alaska. So we bought a lot of it. Oh, and Exurgence moved over on to Twitch. So free Exurgent and Exurgent are the same person, I know. So yes. America's bought a bunch of stuff. We're still paying rent on Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. I remember there's an old 60 Minutes interview. I remember when it was fresh, and when the people from 60 Minutes, it's an old news show here in America that lasted an hour and was on Sundays. I don't know if it's still going. It's so irrelevant if it is. It was at one time a very relevant show. I was doing an interview with Castro, and he opens up his, in his office, opened up his desk and shows all these checks that have been uncashed that America has sent them, because he refuses to cash the checks. But they're still sending the checks to pay the rent on Guantanamo Bay, which they got from Cuba for their efforts, of course, to help Cuba be liberated from Spain. So it's sort of like, now that we helped you out, and then to keep the Spanish from coming back, because they might want to come back, we'll just take this little bay area and port, and Spain was, or Portugal, or not Portugal, Cuba was like, yeah, sure, because it's almost zero territory, and you're going to protect us from another invasion of. Yeah, sounds good. Sounds like a good plan. And so there's no termination date on our lease agreement for the facilities there, and so we're going in there. My understanding is that Gibraltar is only English people. Yes, Beam Slam. There are a lot of daily, and I forget, one of the people that has been around the channel. There are a lot, and a large percentage. I'm going to maybe say 30 or 40% of the population are daily Spanish people that come into work in Gibraltar, and nightly go back to homes in, right across the way. So they come and go in and out of Gibraltar every day to work in Gibraltar. But there are very, very few residents that are Spanish, or people that would claim to be a Spanish cultural, genetic, or whatever ancestry. It is overwhelmingly English or British, however you want to say that, but I think it is mostly British or mostly English. I mean, not too much Scots or Irish or whatnot, but there may be a lot of Scots and Irish. I don't know. But in that, when I say British, I'm sort of referring to at least the Isle of Britain, if not Greater Britain, which would include Ireland. But and where if I'm otherwise I'm talking about England or Wales or Scotland or Ireland, I normally specify that. So and so those are guest workers that come in to work there, and so yeah, I mean, and meaning in the thousands. I don't know how many, like 2,000 or 3,000 or 10,000. I don't know how many come in a day, but a bunch come in a day and come and go. So yeah, so it's a very busy thing going on there. So British is always the greater UK. Well, yes. Well, but see, I look at Britain is a combination of the island, or if I'm talking about pre Anglo-Saxon invasion, and when I've talked about Great Britain, I'm talking about the sort of European British Empire, which would include, the Channel Islands, include things like up at Shetland, and include Ireland for, Great or Greater Britain, So just how that is not British territory. I mean, it's British occupied right now just because of the war, but Faroes Islands. So that's what this is sort of what I'm talking about when I talk about Great Britain. But Britain is either the island or Britain pre the damn Anglo-Saxons coming in. Still just, the good old Celts there. Sometimes the Romans, but yeah. So Breton versus Bretagne. Yeah, I know it is, and that's the way I would spell it different. But I don't know verbally if myself and my accent would get the difference between, because we also have Breton more emphasized, which is Brittany or Bretons, which are the a mix of Bretons fleeing from the Anglo-Saxons and local Celts fleeing from the Franks moving into Gaul. And so this is where you get the holdout. And so you have a slightly different language because it's a different language mix, because some Gaulish elements, I believe, into Breton versus Welsh and or Cornish or Manx, which are all very similar, where Irish and Scottish Gaelic are much closer than these other Gaelic languages. So yes, you're fine. I know you like to do that, Exurgent. But yes, my dog is a Breton Spaniel living in Britain. Very confusing, very confused town. Yes. So yeah, and so we're talking with all these variations, and because I know most of you have been around, but yes, there are some new people either here or watching later. I try to be very careful with my definitions of things, whether we're talking about guns or rifles or cultures or politics or whatever. So there's lots of terms for this stuff. So yes, so sometimes I'm referring to the British, all the island, or sometimes I want to just with English. Okay, well, we're going to end this episode. It's gone on long enough now. I know not a whole lot of playing, but we are moving these troops to get ready to go into here. So come back maybe for next time to see that. All right. So thank you, everyone.